What is it that makes a great leader? What are the secret ingredients? The special sauce on top of the CEO burger? And how do you decide who will fit that bill for one of the biggest and most beloved entertainment empires of all time? Well, maybe it's encouraging to pick the guy who believes a brand is a living entity, and it is enriched or undermined cumulatively over time, the product of 1,000 small gestures. Through the early and mid-1900s, Walt led his trusted staff in the Disney Company through great success in film, television, and his theme park. He was a creative mind, filled with ambition to realize his dreams, and he knew great talent when he saw it. When Walt died in 1966, his company not only lost its leader, but they lost something else that was key to the brand all along: its face. Being the face of the company has an extreme value in bringing the brand a sense of humanity, warmth, and friendliness, and a sense of transparency. The power of being the face of the brand is so much so that even decades after his death, die-hard fans of the company still think of Walt Disney the man first and foremost. Uncle Walt, a small man with a big dream, before then acknowledging Walt Disney as a multi-billion-dollar corporation. After Walt's death, and up until 1984, the Walt Disney Company was left somewhat faceless, and seemed to be just coasting off of the previous ideas and paths set in motion by Walt. Sure, we were still getting new animated movies like The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and The Aristocats, among many other classics that came out during the Disney Animation's Bronze Age. And we were still seeing theme park additions like the opening of Walt Disney World with the Magic Kingdom and the addition of Epcot as well as Tokyo Disneyland. But just because the company was being kept alive didn't necessarily mean it was thriving. What the company was missing when it lost Walt was an idea man or woman, someone confident enough to dream big and innovate, and somebody who audiences could empathize with, and in turn, he could get them in the loop and on board with what was happening. Enter Michael Eisner. If you were a kid growing up during the Eisner era, you probably knew who he was. And not only that, but you may have even been one of the many children who would ask him for his autograph, spotting him out in the Disney parks. That's because he was the television host each and every week for the Disney Sunday Movie Night, as well as The Wonderful World of Disney, which, by the way, only ever had one other host, Walt Disney himself. After seeing just how charismatic and confident Eisner was during these TV spots, it's hard to believe he was never a performer. But studio management believed he could do the hosting job after seeing him in a screen test. Eisner even beat out other potential hosts like Tom Hanks, Walt's nephew Roy E. Disney, and the big cheese himself, Mickey Mouse. It's clear to see the passion, honor, and energy Eisner was feeling during this time for the Walt Disney Company. He was truly a kid in a candy store, and his enthusiasm was infectious.
We all know that invisible friends like Fuzzbucket really don't exist.
I beg your pardon?
Mickey, can you believe this? Fuzzbucket.
Eisner was hired by the Walt Disney Company in September 1984. Shareholders Sid Bass and Roy E. Disney brought in Eisner as CEO and chairman of the board, the first outsider hired for this role, and they also brought in former Warner Brothers chief Frank Wells as president to replace Ron W. Miller. And Eisner brought along with him Jeffrey Katzenberg. You see, before Michael Eisner was hired, the public perception of the company was that it frankly had lost steam. But Eisner, along with Frank Wells and Katzenberg, brought hope back to the company. They came in and revitalized the excitement level audiences and Disney employees had about the ambitious Disney reputation. After all, when it came to businesses, Eisner believed if it's not growing, it's going to die. People were watching to see if Eisner would live up to the image of the man whose role he was filling, Walt himself. But Eisner's legacy and role within the company was obviously different. While Walt was hosting television spots, whether filming inside Disneyland or in his office with blueprints and Mickey plushes surrounding him, He was the creator of it all. He was a creator, standing amongst his creation. Eisner, on the other hand, was a fan first and foremost, standing within another legend's creation. Sure, it may have felt like he was in charge, but the sense of ownership just wasn't there yet, at least not in the beginning. So Eisner began bringing in new ideas. For Walt, it all started with a mouse, and for Eisner, he decided his mouse would be a rabbit. Eisner hit the ground running. In 1985, he revamped production on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a story Ron Miller originally bought the rights to in 1981. They got Steven Spielberg, a buddy of Eisner's, to produce, who in turn got the major studios who owned the rights to other famous animated characters, such as Felix the Cat and Looney Tunes, to agree to let all their animated characters to exist under one roof for the first time ever. That's another thing about Michael Eisner. He had connections. Before he worked for Disney, Eisner was president and CEO of Paramount Pictures from 1976 to 1984, and worked for major television networks NBC, CBS, and ABC. He was a notorious networker and saw the potential of combining things that worked and growing an empire. During Eisner's time, Disney acquired Miramax Films in 1993, as well as ESPN and his former employer ABC. It was also during Eisner's time that Disney began working with Pixar as a production company, releasing their first feature film, Toy Story, in 1995. Michael Eisner wasn't just spreading the Disney seed through media, but other countries outside of the United States as well. Eisner launched the Disney Decade in the 1990s, as a way of growing in not only film and media, but vastly expanding the Disney theme park footprint. He brought us Euro Disney Resort, now Disneyland Paris, Disney MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios, Disney's California Adventure Park, now Disney California Adventure, Disney MGM Studio Paris, now Walt Disney Studio Park, Tokyo Disney Sea, and Disney's Animal Kingdom. Plus more, including water park and resort additions. He was also responsible for the licensing deals that brought us the Star Tours and Indiana Jones attractions, as well as
Muppet Vision 3D!
Eisner's reign put Disney back on a lot of maps. Things were really shaking and moving for the company. Disney animation was back and as captivating as audiences remembered from the early years. The Disney animation renaissance all started with The Little Mermaid in 1989.
I don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be bad.
Also during Eisner's time, Disney took up real estate beyond the parks with The Lion King on Broadway, the Disney Store, and Disney Cruise Line, as well as the virtual market with the Final Fantasy Disney crossover game, Kingdom Hearts. It seemed like Eisner was on top of the world, but unfortunately, it didn't last forever. Jeffrey Katzenberg, originally brought in by Eisner himself, lobbied to become Eisner's number 2 in the company. Frank Wells already held that position, so to save Wells's feelings, Eisner declined the request. When Wells sadly died in a crash in 1993, leaving the position open, Eisner still refused the job to Katzenberg, causing tensions to arise between the two, even though Eisner claims that his reasonings behind not promoting Katzenberg were due to Roy E. Disney's own personal grievances. But whatever the reason, Katzenberg was fired and went on to found DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen. And with that, Michael Eisner's story takes a turn. He hired Michael Ovitz to be president, but Ovitz left shortly after with a no-fault termination. After this, a shareholder lawsuit was brought against Eisner and the rest of the Disney board in 1996 because shareholders just weren't pleased anymore. And now, fast forward to 2000. It seemed the Disney animation renaissance was over, and we moved into what we now call the Disney animation post-renaissance, which you can learn about by watching our Disney Film Animation Eras Explained series here, by clicking on the card in the top right of the screen at the end of this video, or checking out the link in the description below. To put it bluntly, the animated movies at this time were just flopping. Eisner's parks projects were also facing scrutiny. The original plans for California Adventure was a theme park called Westcott, a counterpart to Walt Disney World's Epcot. But what we got instead was disappointing comparatively. Pixar even started seeking out a new distribution partner at this time, due to feuds between Michael Eisner and Steve Jobs. Roy E. Disney started the Save Disney campaign in 2003 to get Eisner out.
Lately, though, I've become concerned with the direction in which the Disney company is moving. I believe it's time to take action, and we could use your help. If you're a Disney shareholder, in my view, the best way to help save Disney is to vote no on the re-election of Michael Eisner, George Mitchell, Judith Estrin, and John Bryson.
And by 2004, he and former board member Stanley Gold rallied 43% of shareholders on their side. And at the annual Disney shareholders meeting, they didn't re-elect Eisner. They instead gave his chairman position to the board member George Mitchell. However, the board did not immediately remove Eisner as CEO. The board was putting pressure on Eisner to resign, so he did, a year before his contract was up. On March 13th, 2005, Eisner announced he would step down. Bob Iger, who during this time was Disney's president and chief operating officer, was a favorite of the board and Eisner, so Eisner passed on his day-to-day duties to Iger. Eisner even stated that his confidence in Bob Iger was the only reason he agreed to step down early. And at the end of September that same year, Eisner no longer worked for the big cheese. Whatever your opinion is on Michael Eisner, the truth of the matter is that during his 21 years at the Walt Disney Company, it was transformed from a film and theme park company with $1.8 billion in enterprise value into a global media empire valued at $80 billion. Even though for some, Eisner's downfall may be the part of his story that remains on the forefront of their minds when they hear his name, Roy E. Disney and other board members who originally hired Eisner were getting at the root of something key when they decided to hire him. They were hiring someone who, like Walt, had a unique combination of public brand representation and big dreams. They hired a guy who has said, "I don't think individual achievement in business is the most meaningful way to operate." And Frank Wells was kinda like Walt's brother Roy, the guy who handled the business side of things and kept the dreamers' big dreams in check. Katzenberg, as the head of the film studios, was one of those one-in-a-million talents that truly should be credited with pushing the Eisner-era Disney films forward. He was a guy Eisner really relied on and trusted with that department. But without thriving off of a lead team that worked to bring a proper yang to Eisner's yin, Eisner seemed to fall. What do you remember most when you think about Eisner? Was his era impactful to you in any way? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you want to hear more about important Disney players throughout history, check out the rest of our Disney Legends playlist at the end card to this video. Also, if you like what we're doing here on Network 1901, share your favorite videos. And check out our Patreon page to see if becoming a patron is right for you. If you want to help us for free, like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm Angie, and until next time, hurry back.